Morning folks. Sorry about the dramas of yesterday's video. I had a complete laptop failure, so eventually it came back to life, but not until very late last night. So I'm not sure how it's going to go today. Got to get myself an appointment at the Apple store to get that sorted out. But anyway, I thought what we'd do, because I'd been away for a while and so much has happened since we were away, I thought I would skip Electric Tuesday today and just kind of cover off some of the news that's happened, the driver moves, and all the big stories that have happened whilst I've been taking some time off the channel. So obviously the biggest ones were driver moves, weren't they? There were lots of them. It all kicked off with Daniel Ricciardo's move to Renault, which is while I was away. I don't know what you thought about that. Certainly surprised a lot of people, particularly those at Red Bull, who thought he was on the verge of signing a contract with them. He kind of told them that it was almost a formality and that he would be signing the week after the test, and then at the last minute he announced that he'd moved to Renault. So my view on that is that look, he wants to get away from Red Bull. He has felt trapped is the wrong word, but he has been given an opportunity by Red Bull, like many of these young drivers do. He's been given an incredible career in Formula One, so I think he's very grateful, but it's also quite restrictive. As a racing driver, I think a little bit like the Lewis Hamilton situation at McLaren years ago, he just needed to break free, and not only from Red Bull but also from Max Verstappen. Max Verstappen is a force. He's a force to be reckoned with, not only in the world of Formula One but inside that world of Red Bull racing as well. You know, he comes with an entourage which mainly consists of his dad, who is also a force and a driving force in Max's career. I've seen it a few times. I've seen Jos Verstappen approaching Max after a difficult situation like a retirement on track where the media are starting to circle Max, and I've seen Jos creeping up from the outside to get a sort of a visual message over the top of the crowd to Max to either say, you know, don't say anything, or remember what we talked about, or those kind of little pieces of assistance that only an experienced Formula One driver who's been through that kind of thing can really help with. So I think all of that combines to mean that, and together with Max's talent, of course, to mean that you know, Max is a massive force within that Red Bull camp. And I think Daniel Ricciardo knew that, knows that, doesn't want to be overshadowed by it. And I don't think that's a sign that Daniel Ricciardo is kind of scared of Max. I don't think he feels inferior to Max in terms of driving talent. I don't think he's inferior in terms of driving talent. I think they're two incredibly good racing drivers. But as a racing driver, much as they'll all tell you that they're all doing it for the team and all the rest of it, they're all out for number one, and understandably so. They are there to self-promote. They are there to win championships. They don't really care about the Constructors' Championship. They care about, you know, their own world titles and their own driver record, which you know you can understand. And so if he wants to be a multiple world champion, can he do that with Max Verstappen alongside him at Red Bull Racing? Yes, he could do it, but it would be a much harder job, because his teammate would be taking valuable points off him all the time. So why not make a fresh start with a manufacturer where he can carve out himself a new position, if you like, work himself into a team leader situation over the next couple of years, and when Renault finally do get on song and close up with the top two engine manufacturers, well then he might be best placed to go and capitalise on all that. So I can understand the Daniel Ricciardo move, even if it caught us all by surprise. With a bit of hindsight now, I can definitely see why he's done it. It's also the first time in his career that he's been, certainly in his Formula One career, that he's been free of Red Bull racing. So a little bit more like the Lewis Hamilton situation, it's the first time that he has been able to actually take control of his own destiny. And that must be a pretty exciting opportunity for him. Then we got the news that Fernando Alonso would not be racing in Formula One next year. And that wasn't so much of a surprise, was it? We all kind of knew that was coming. We thought it would be a direct transfer to IndyCar next year, and I still think it will be. We now know that he's testing on a road course in an IndyCar very soon. So that wasn't really a surprise, and I can understand that move completely from his point of view as well. I mean, look, he's given Formula One some amazing years. Still, I keep telling everybody, one of the most complete drivers that I've ever been fortunate enough to work with. But he's made some bad decisions, or together with his management, he's made some bad decisions along the way, and that's not just about where he went, but it's about how he behaved and what he did when he was at each of those teams. He has unfortunately ruined a lot of relationships over the years between him and his teams, between him and other drivers, and you've got to say that that has hampered him later in his career, when, like now, there's no way that a Mercedes would look at taking a Fernando Alonso. If you have those relationships breaking down, it becomes very hard to be the best Formula One team that you can be. So I think that's a real shame for Fernando that's how it's played out for him. But he's given Formula One great times, great experiences, great years, and I have no doubt that whatever he does go on to do next, they will only benefit from having Fernando Alonso in their Series 2. There's only so long you can expect a driver of the calibre of Fernando Alonso to be running round at the back, to be breaking down every 5 minutes, to be desperately looking to get into Q3. Those are not the goals that he wants over a Formula One weekend. So it's really no surprise that he's taken this decision. I'm almost a little bit surprised he stuck it out for as long as he has. Thanks, mate.
Well done!
Carlos Sainz was next, and you know, that one I guess was slightly forced upon him to some extent, wasn't it? Because Daniel Ricciardo coming in alongside Nico Hülkenberg meant that Sainz, who was only on loan of course from Red Bull, had to leave. So his options then were, do Red Bull take up the option that they have on him? And there was a situation in his contract which said that if Red Bull want to take up that option, then he has no choice, but he has to go back to Red Bull. But the option was only if they put him into the senior Red Bull team does he then have to go and rejoin Red Bull, continue his career at that organisation. If Red Bull had decided no, we'd like you to go and be back into the Toro Rosso team, then I think, as far as I understand it, Carlos Sainz had the option to turn that down and break away from the Red Bull family. As it was, of course, we now know that Red Bull chose not to take up that option, and they've promoted Pierre Gasly, which meant that Carlos Sainz was then a little bit like Daniel Ricciardo, for the first time in a long time, free of the chains, if you like, of Red Bull Racing. And I don't want to make this sound like they're all breaking out of some sort of prison, because they're not. You know, Red Bull have given incredible opportunities to these young drivers. They invest an awful lot of money and they give them great careers. I saw a tweet the other day from a friend of mine, Antonio Felix da Costa, who said in his tweet that he was incredibly grateful to Red Bull Racing. Yes, they didn't give him an F1 career, and on one hand you could be disappointed for that, but they gave him an incredible career. And I think when you're looking at these young drivers on young driver programs, you have to look at that. Making a career out of motorsport, a paid professional career, is very difficult to do. And if you've got the support and the backing, particularly the financial backing of a big organisation like Red Bull, it can really catapult you into great, great things. And I think all these guys have to be very grateful for that. So Carlos Sainz found himself back on the market, if you like, free for the first time to choose the direction he wants to take. And I think he did well in getting in early at McLaren, making those conversations happen and securing himself a seat. I think it's a good move for him. I think he'll fit in very well there. I think that, McLaren, although it's been difficult recently for McLaren and for their drivers, of course, that can only be a matter of time before that changes. I know we've been saying that for a number of years now, but you know, they're putting things in place at McLaren now in terms of management and structure that will provide fruits further down the line. So if you get in now, I think, you know, there's got to be a turning point. I think it will be a good move for him. I think he's a great driver, talented driver. So I think when the car comes good, he'll be very well placed. Gasly to Red Bull Racing, I think we knew it was coming for quite a while. I think it's a bit of a no-brainer, not only because I think Gasly deserves the shot. I think he's done a very good job in the Toro Rosso, but also because Red Bull Racing were very short of options, if we're honest about it, as to what they could do with their senior team. So they don't have a natural successor outside of the Toro Rosso program. Even now, who's going to take Gasly's shoes? There's no real obvious choice. That left the second seat at McLaren with a big question mark over it. Would they retain Stoffel Van Dorn, or would they go for somebody else? And now look, the somebody else option, there were a few options, aren't there? Because of what's happening particularly with Mercedes young driver program, we've got a situation where there are a number of good drivers affiliated with big teams like Ferrari, like Mercedes, who don't have a seat on the grid for next year, or potentially don't have a seat. And so the McLaren seat, the remaining seat, was actually a really attractive option for lots of those people. And we know that big discussions have happened between some of those big teams trying to place their drivers, people like Esteban Ocon, at McLaren. In the end, it's not really a massive surprise to me that they've gone with Lando Norris, announced yesterday. But the fact that they gave him the 2 Fridays of Spa and Monza to run in the car was a big sign. They've been grooming him for a while, and they see him as their next Lewis Hamilton. They have helped him through his junior career, which has been very successful, by the way. And, you know, he kind of is a character. He's very young. He's got a great name. I think everything about him shouts, you know, future world champion. And I think McLaren see that. They had approaches from Red Bull, from Helmut Marko, to try and take Lando Norris to Red Bull to fit into their young driver program, and turned them down to keep hold of him. That also is a big sign that they had every intention of using him in the car next year. So really pleased for him. Congratulations to Lando. And I think it's a good move for McLaren as well. Exciting times in terms of the driver lineup at McLaren Racing. So what do you think of all that? Agree, disagree? Would you have liked to have seen things done a bit differently? And what about what's still to happen? Still big rumours about, of course, Force India. Big talk that Lance Stroll will end up in that seat before the end of this season, which means that Robert Kubica will end up taking his Williams seat for the rest of this season. Beyond that, though, we're pretty sure there have already been discussions at Williams for next year, with Mercedes potentially placing Ocon and possibly George Russell in the 2 Williams cars for next year. Just a rumour at this stage, but it could well happen. It would be great to see, wouldn't it? What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Let me know what you'd like to see, if you would have done things differently, if you're a driver or a team principal, and let me know what you think of the video. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe. I'll see you next time.